Okay, welcome back to Moreland City Council's August meeting. Can I please have a motion to reopen the meeting? Moved Councillor Bolton, seconded Councillor Langton-Thompson. All those in favour? All those opposed? Declare that carried. Yes, Councillor Ratnam.
Can I move a motion to bring the 2 sets of minutes back on the table?
Okay.
I think that's the right wording.
Yes. Motion to bring the minutes back, to lay the minutes back on the table, to put them back on the table, do something on the table.
Pick them up.
Pick them up off the table. Pick them up off the table. All those in favour? All those opposed? I declare that carried. And we'll now turn to the minutes of the last two meetings. Somebody to move them, please. Moved Councillor Ratnam. Somebody to second. Seconded Councillor Rob Thompson. Is there any discussion?
No.
No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those opposed? I declare that carried. DCI 3615 Glenroy Skate Park site. Councillor John Kavanagh.
Mayor, could I move an alternative recommendation to the one on in our agenda? Point 1 stays as is written on the agenda, to note the assessment of the sites at Glenroy area for the location of the proposed skate park. But point 2, that a further report come to Council that includes further assessment of the first 2 preferred sites and the proposed cost for the construction on each site. And number 3, that this report, it should say includes the population of all Glenroy and Hadfield residents under 21 years. And 4, that this report come to Council prior to March 2016 so that Council can consider this project in the 2016-17 budget. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, my recommendation is different to that in the report, as I do believe this is a worthy project. I do believe that the report only looked, I know we've had some information since, but just at the growth numbers of Glenroy. I also want to see the entire numbers of Glenroy and of Hadfield, and not just from 12-year-olds, because if we build this in something like 2017, then we obviously want the site to be there for around 20 years. So the children that are born today, we hope will be using this. So not just 12-year-olds that are currently here. So I'd like to see those figures, and I'd like to see the costs of this. And I do think the first 2 preferred sites that were mentioned are clearly the preferred ones. And so I really think it's important that we put our resources into having all of those 2 sites.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Yildiz.
Yeah, can I just commend Grant, Thorne, his staff, and also the officers and social development. I think this has been a collaborative effort, and I can't wait for this. I think we've gone from election to election to advocate on behalf of some of the residents to... What are you looking at me weirdly for?
I think keep going. Not making any of yourself at all.
I'm trying to copy language. No, it's been, it's great. I think the office needs to be commended. I just can't wait until this report is finalised and we actually get on with the job of giving the youngsters good opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Is there any further debate on this item? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I'd just like to indicate, well, certainly strong support for Councillor Kavanagh's alternative recommendation, but also if it did end up being that the ATC Cook Reserve was chosen as the site for a skate park, that would fit in very well with the proposal for an Aboriginal community hub on the Merri-bek site, because I think that whole area needs to be seen as a precinct with the sporting clubs in the ATC Cook Reserve as well as the Merri-bek site, and so I'd certainly support. Obviously, that's got to come back after assessment, etc.
Yes.
Can I say, in order for that to happen, we probably should add in the 2 preferred sites and ATC Cook Reserve, because that's not one of the 2 that's listed currently as a top 2.
Okay.
Okay.
ATC, it's in here already.
No, it's only...
Not one of the 2 preferred.
No,
it's not one of the 2 preferred sites.
It's listed alphabetically as the first site, but it wasn't one of the top 3 sites.
Oh, I see, yes.
Yeah, so I'm happy for George to do further work on so I'll amend that to read that. So the 2 preferred sites and ATC Cook Reserve to match them all up.
Okay, we'll now take the motion with that amendment. Is there any further? Yes, Councillor Ratnam.
I too would like to commend this motion to Council, and I believe that we're all agreed on the importance of this facility for young people in the northern part of our municipality. We've talked a couple of times in this chamber about the need about the lack of infrastructure, social infrastructure and recreational infrastructure for young people in the northern part of our municipality, and there is quite a big differential between the south and the north in terms of where people can go, the public spaces that people occupy, and how connected young people feel to the communities they live in, and these sort of modes of infrastructure are so critical in that connection to community. So I wholeheartly support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Yes,
Can I just
Councillor.
ask, Grant, is that, when the officers did this report, was ATC Cook Reserve one of the prime sort of sites?
Grant's just pulling up the page.
Sorry, John, did you say Soil Reserve?
The 3%, sorry, I've just turned off the page.
Where are the three? Soil Reserve?
The former
ATC.
Glenroy Primary School.
Yeah, which is
then
Wheatsheaf Road.
Northern Golf Course,
Yeah,
then Bel Air
and
Avenue.
ATC.
Yeah. ATC wasn't in the top two, but I know that Councillor Bolton wants it to be explored further, so I'm happy for that to happen.
Okay.
Great. Is there any further debate on this item? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those opposed? I declare that carried. Moving on now to economic development. Oh, this is exciting. DED 7015, Amendment C142, Moreland Apartment Design Code. Councillor Tapanos.
Mayor and councillors, I move recommendation on page 266 and will speak if I have a seconder.
Yes, seconded Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Tapanos.
Mayor, councillors. It is exciting to actually see this report come here and to see the progress that has been made already. When I first got elected to council and we heard that the community was dissatisfied with a lot of the planning outcomes in Moreland, and I must say throughout my years I think that view is still prevailing. And councillors have been thinking about how do we actually change planning outcomes. What is it that we actually do? And what we do is we change the Moreland planning scheme, and it's great to see that the Planning and Economic Development Department over the last few years have been working on some very important strategic documents, planning scheme amendments to change the Moreland planning scheme and to make it better in many ways, and to remove some of the things that we have seen in our municipality that we don't ever want to see repeated again. So this significant piece of work talks about apartments and good design for apartments, and it's gone through a number of steps and a number of processes, and the community has been consulted widely in its development. So it includes things like how do we make the apartment design better for our community, not just in the materials used, but how can we make sure that apartments are of an adequate space, are adaptable for disability use, receive good natural light in all inhabitable rooms. How can we make sure that the interface between apartment buildings of 5 stories or more fit well into the surrounding neighbourhood and interface with public grounds like footpaths and parks are improved and enhanced. And I must say, currently it is not great. Currently this is determined by the National Construction Code, and I don't think that is enough. So we have designed this new code, the Moreland Apartment Design Code, to improve the quality of apartments in our city. It's something we've listened to the community say for many years, and now is our opportunity to implement it. So councillors, tonight we send this to the Minister, and we say to the Minister very loudly that we want you to implement this, and we want you to do so very quickly in the scheme. And why is there an urgency? Because we've seen upwards of 3,000 apartments constructed in our city between 2007 and 2013, and many more apartments are going to be constructed in the near future. So it is urgent, it is important that we get this in the planning scheme as soon as possible. Now I know that there might be some moves by the department to talk about implementing something similar to this right across the state, and that is welcomed, but we don't think we should be penalised. We who've developed this good design code, we want it implemented now. We want it to be a bit of a test case whilst the state government develops its own code to implement across the state. We don't think we should have to wait for that. We think this should be implemented now. So I encourage the community and councillors to get on board and actually write to the Minister and support our good design code. I would finish with we will see a substantial improvement in the planning outcomes in Moreland. A few months ago, we adopted the Brunswick Structure Plan, and we said very loud and clearly where we wanted mandatory height controls. We said that some developments had gotten completely out of control, and we saw buildings of 10 and more stories, and that's not what we want to see. So that piece of work with mandatory controls goes a long way to dealing with inappropriate developments along the public transport corridors in the structure plan zones. We saw another significant piece of work. Now, it didn't get implemented 100% as council had wished, but nonetheless it's a significant improvement, and that was the residential zones. Once more, we've said we want to protect the backyard. We want to encourage development in the activity centres, in the public transport corridors. We don't want excessive dwelling development in people's neighbourhoods. And this, I think, is the third piece of the jigsaw puzzle, because we hear quite often that the development, the departments, the dwellings are not good standard, not good material, and this needs to change. So this does that exactly. So, Council, I urge you to vote for it, and I just wanted to say well done to council officers and everyone who has been working on this for many years, because once more, Moreland is leading the charge. We were first to lead the charge with ESD improvements, and now we're first to lead the charge and getting in early and saying to the rest of the state, follow us, have a look at our code. It's a good code. Implement it for Moreland and then implement it for Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Ratnam.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I think you've covered some of the really essential elements that this proposal very comprehensively.
And then some.
No, but I think it is worth us pausing and giving this report the time to be spoken to. It is a result of years and years of very, very hard work and real visionary leadership, I think, from all the officers that have been involved in the development of this. As noted in the report, the state government is looking at these at this sort of proposal and have put their own proposal similar to this for consultation. So that shows you how much local government can really lead the conversation and the policy development in this space. This has come about as a result of so much feedback around the poor quality of some of the medium density, higher density developments in our community. I'd say the number one request I get as a councillor is, can you improve the quality of these developments? We don't mind them going up, but can you do something about them? You know, natural ventilation, space, amenity to adjoining properties, all those issues come up, you know, so often and have for the last few years. So it is wonderful to see us taking a lead in this space. I'd just like to note this report outlines the panel findings. So these sort of amendments go to panel, they've had community consultation, the panel makes some recommendations, then council decides which of those panel recommendations it keeps, it retains, or it discards. And I'm really I'm pleased to note that a number of the panel recommendations that were quite risk averse, I'd say, or they were limited, I believe, in some of their scoping, have been rejected in our final proposal going forward. For example, some of the recommendations that the prescriptive requirements should be removed are something that we're not going to be supportive, because that's actually the intent of this whole proposal, is that we have some minimum standards. So I'm glad that we're pushing for those things in terms of height and space in dwellings. I'll leave it at that, but there are a number of recommendations in the report where we have spoken to the panel's recommendations but provided very good justification for why we need to keep some of the original elements of the proposal in there. So I really commend this and thank everyone who's been part of this, and really it is in the hands of the Minister now and the state government, who has a number of our amendments before them, and they have a chance to really deliver for the community things that they've been asking for many, many years, and I hope the State Planning Minister does approve this as is.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Is there any further debate on this item? Councillor Bolton.
Ask a question.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if this is covered in this guide, and I actually did mean to raise it much earlier and then I just forgot about it. Is the cladding on apartment blocks, cladding was the cause of the fire in the Docklands high-rise, and since then they've discovered the same problematic flammable cladding has been used on a whole lot of high-rise buildings throughout Melbourne. I'm just wondering if there's any, this issue is addressed in our design code, or is that something which we can look at in other documents?
Sure. I'm happy to refer the question to the Director.
Certainly, through the Mayor. The issue of the building materials are actually controlled through the National Construction Code, and through the Victorian Building Council. They're working with all building surveyors across Victoria, investigating all buildings using that kind of material, and now working back directly with the landowners to address that issue. And councils are all cooperating, providing them information as to where we've got plans confirming those materials are being used. It's not something that it is a step too far for planning to get involved in that level of detail, but it is something that we do look at materials when we assess applications, particularly for reflectivity and those sorts of things. We're now mindful of this particular material, and if a plan had that level of detail, officers can pick it up. But ultimately, it is a final decision through building permits.
Okay. Thank you, Kirsten. Any further debate on this item? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare it carried unanimously. DED 7115, Rogers Memorial Reserve Heritage Council hearing. Councillor Kavanagh.
I move the officer recommendation on page 441.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Kavanagh.
I'll reserve my right to close the debate.
Okay.
I'd like to move a deferral on the basis of the question that was asked in discussion.
Okay, there's a deferral that's been moved. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that lost. Any debate on this item?
Yes.
Yes?
Obviously, I'm going to be speaking against, as usual. I haven't changed my position. I just find it extraordinary. I'd like to commend the residents who have really taken us up and taken us to task on this one, and have questioned us every step of the way. And I commend them because, it's the journey's been, fraught with a lot of blood, sweat and tears, but, you took it to the Heritage Trust and you had a hearing. Yes, it wasn't successful, but, what came out of that was that they actually suggested that council review a heritage overlay. What I do think is extraordinary that council did that and then said, oh, yes, we will for that portion, but it's okay if we just sneak in this this building anyway. But I mean, obviously that was never going to be any different, was it?
What's been swapped out for?
Sorry, no further comment from the gallery. Councillor Gillies.
So at the end of the day, I'll be voting against it because I think that if it's being suggested that we look at it for heritage overlay, we should be looking at the whole reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Any further discussion on this item? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I guess I'd just like to say I'm uncomfortable voting on this, given that a resident, in discussion had actually raised, in the earlier residents' question time, raised what seemed like serious allegations, but I haven't seen a copy of these allegations, and I was at that time hoping to hear more of a response from the CEO the allegations sounded quite concerning, and that's why I moved for a deferral. I just feel very uncomfortable voting on this report, and I think unless I hear a little bit about the substance of the allegations and the response from the council, I'll be voting against the report.
I will note in response to that concern that the question that was raised by the resident during question time was in relation to a complaint that has been made to the Ombudsman about the process of this matter. So around the planning approval and the process that council ran in coming to the decision to approve a planning approval, including consultation around this site. It's not in relation to the motion that's being considered tonight, which is specifically to note the Heritage Report, which was the result of a complaint to Heritage Victoria over this site, and to consider a future amendment to introduce a heritage overlay on Rogers Memorial Reserve as part of our next heritage review. So I would say that the two items are separate, and that the complaint that has been placed with the Ombudsman has been responded to, but that at this point the resident has not received the response and is likely to do so, if not today, then tomorrow. No further comment from the gallery. Thank you very much. Is there any further debate on this item?
If not, I'll close.
No, if not, Councillor Kavanagh to close the debate.
Okay, I'll just, when it came to Council's attention that there was a petition to Heritage Victoria, I was actually the councillor that moved that we not take any action until that take place. Heritage Victoria is very clear in their advice, and I'll read it directly from their report. The committee finds that neither the War Memorial nor the nominated portion, bracket, together the place, end of bracket, meets the cultural heritage significance threshold for inclusion in the Victorian Heritage Register in relation to any of the Heritage Council's criteria. It did, as mentioned, say that it has contributed to local community life, and therefore we have had a heritage consultant, not our officers, a heritage consultant, qualified heritage consultant, go through. And his report is, I'm not sure if it's a male or female.
Dated after the heritage.
If there are any further interjections, I will have you removed from the gallery if there are any further interjections.
That report, put in a complaint about the governance of the process because you are not.
You've already put in a complaint. I will fine you if you continue to interject under the Local Government Act. This is your second warning. If you continue to interject, I will fine you under the Local Government Act. Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh.
Again, the consultant's conclusion is that there would not be any adverse impact because the community centre will not affect any of the existing and potential heritage features of the site. It's crystal clear.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Can I call division, please?
Yes, division has been called. All those who voted in favour of the item, please raise your hand. All against? Can I clarify? I believe that Councillor Teddy has been recorded as voting in favour and he actually voted against. DD 7215, planning enforcement. Somebody to move, please. Yes?
Gilly's moved.
May I just... Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I'm trying to get up. Thank you very much for the report. I did enjoy reading it.
I just need to get it moved and seconded.
Okay, so can I please move it? But I just want to ask a question before I do that. Well, no, actually, I'll move it first.
All right.
Okay, I'll move
Move Councillor Gillies. So I'm just second, please. Seconded Councillor Rob Thompson. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Rob. Sorry, just very quickly, you caught me off guard because I was still back at the last motion and report. So in terms of this, it was very good to get this information, so thank you very much for that. However, my recollection of the April meeting was that we actually wanted to look at whether or not we had enough officers on the ground. I thought that that was what we were getting at. So although, and I did read it, and I couldn't see anything that kind of looked at whether or not we needed more people, because my concerns around enforcement in planning is that there are too many building sites that are in breach of, obviously in breach of their permit or operating quite dangerously, not in line with any sort of traffic management program that I can see, especially on like places like Pascoe Vale Road, that are operating and are cutting off, footpaths for long periods of time and nothing's been done about it. So the questions that were raised around that, and I think a number of other councillors brought up the same kind of concerns. It wasn't about, how we're performing. We kind of know that we probably aren't performing as well as we could in relation to how many breaches are being seen. Do we need more people on the ground was the point of what we wanted.
Okay. So I think the CEO would like to respond to that.
Just through the Mayor. Really more to clarify that point. So the intent, you're talking about a number of things as well, aren't you? So there's the planning enforcement, but if you're also talking about the way traffic management plans are enforced, is that it's a full gamut of things, isn't it? Because that's broader than planning enforcement. So that might be why we perhaps haven't addressed that full.
Sorry, just to clarify that, it was because part of getting a permit might have a traffic management plan. How do we then enforce that? Are we enforcing it? That sort of stuff. So it was actually the whole scope of actually making builders and developers adhere to planning permits in a safe way, in a reasonable way. Yeah.
It sounds like it's broader than also the planning enforcement, though, isn't it? It will be including a range of other permits that builders also get once they have a planning permit. There's a whole bunch of other permits that they may need in the course of the building works, and you're actually looking at all of those as well. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and Councillor Ratnam, you also had a question?
Just a follow-up question. I concur with Councillor Gillies' concerns, and I had a similar question about the report as well. And I think in terms of responding to it, I think the CEO is right in terms of scope is quite big, but in terms of the report talking about proactive and reactive enforcement, I noted that the reactive enforcement figure still hasn't met the target, and despite the fact that it's been fallen dramatically, we still haven't met that 100 outstanding cases target. And also with the proactive enforcement, there's potentially, they said 167 matters that are going to come beforehand, and we've just started investigating sort of 29 or something, I think, actively. So it's the question about what we need to do to address that gap, and potentially what we could do is defer the report to have more of a discussion or ask for a follow-up report. So I'd be happy to support either option.
Okay, so
so I'd suggest to Councillor Gillies either to move a deferral of this item,
I think,
or to add a further point requesting a further report that would outline those concerns that you've raised.
I think that we'll defer because
that's true. So Councillor Rob Thompson has raised that as you move the report, you can't defer it. Would anybody else care to defer? Councillor Ratnam proposes to defer this report. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Anyway, the wind blows.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Notices of motion. Councillors, can I ask that you please start simply by stating the motion, and then we'll gain a seconder to your motion prior to you providing a background. So the first notice of motion is 3815, 1 of 106 McBride Street, Fawkner. Was that Councillor Rob Thompson?
Yes, can I move the motion as presented on page 478?
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson.
At a recent UPC meeting, we made some decisions in relation to McBride Street, adjusting hours of operation to the detriment of the local community there, but with a broader aspect in mind. Now we would like to follow up and make sure that we are committing to that and keeping an eye on what activity is being undertaken at McBride Street. Whilst there is an action group, this task force, this follows on from the UPC meeting in requesting further information comes to Council on a regular basis so that we are keeping abreast of it and getting an understanding of what resources are being tasked to follow up on it and what results that those resources are gleaning.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Bolton, did you wish to add to that? No? Is there any debate on this item?
No. Just thanks, Rob.
Great. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Notice of motion 3915, review of policy and procedures regarding use of interpreters. Councillor Bolton.
That council review the policy and procedures regarding the use of interpreters, including training of staff and councillors, procedures for formal meetings such as urban planning committee meetings where an interpreter is being used, and procedures for residents to request an interpreter.
Great. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Bolton.
So this issue has come up or been really raised for my attention because of the issues happening in the McBride Street area in Fawkner. Although I have, for the whole time I've been on council, heard complaints from various residents about, usually with regard to planning matters, about how a lot of people don't understand or ask other people to represent them, and often it is residents from a non-English speaking background who sign pro forma letters. I mean, not only people from a non-English speaking background, but, you know, that's an easier thing for people to do than to really work out a letter, especially, you know, not only if you're not non-English speaking, but if you don't speak bureaucraties as well. But in this particular case, with the Fawkner residents of McBride Street, the elderly residents have been quite engaged with the issues in the street. These are houses that are across the road from factories. The factories came a number of years after the houses. But of course, initially the people the council's been hearing from mostly are the English-speaking residents, or in one case, the daughter of a resident. We had two incidents which indicate to me strongly that we need a review of our policy. One was a sort of planning negotiation with an applicant for increased hours, where there was no interpreter provided, although interpreters had been requested, and half the meeting, or half the residents, couldn't understand what was being said in the meeting, and were really excluded. And the woman who was interpreting for a mother was not a trained interpreter, and she didn't want that role of a trained interpreter. The second time was for the Urban Planning Committee, and I had thought that because we'd had this earlier, the residents had had this earlier discussion where there'd been clearly a need for an interpreter, the interpretation that led up to the Urban Planning Committee, despite a number of requests, was that only one resident required an interpreter, which indicates to me there needs to be a clearer process to be followed for residents and staff with working out what's required. But then when we got to the Urban Planning Committee and we had an interpreter, we didn't have, and it wasn't the officer's fault, if it was clearly an officer who hadn't had an engagement with interpreters and the requirements of interpreting. But the interpreter was given a very difficult job, a much more difficult job than a courtroom. He wasn't really given a proper briefing. He wasn't provided with copies of the documents that he'd have to be able to interpret. And obviously planning matters are quite complicated to explain. And also there was an assumption that he would not do the normal interpreting process, but summarise a speech after it was given. That's not how formal interpreting works. You have, you say a couple of sentences and it's interpreted backwards and forwards. So to me, these two incidents indicate that indicates we haven't used interpreters in urban planning committees before, and that indicates we need to have a process to guide staff as well as residents and probably councillors as well. So I strongly feel the need to move this motion, and I haven't put a deadline because I'm not sure what's a realistic deadline for council, but certainly is quite, I think, a very important thing that it be done in a expeditious way.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Gillies, you wish to add to that?
Look, I'll just be very quick. For those councillors who weren't involved in that particular meeting, there were a number of issues that none of us really thought about, I think. And that was that, firstly, when you're talking about planning or anything to do with council, there may be other legislation that's, governs it, and it can be tricky to actually interpret that if you're not sure of what that legislation is or understand the processes that are involved. Also, all of us as councillors, when we were speaking, didn't really give enough time to for whatever we were saying to be interpreted, because we aren't used to that either. So I think that this is and we all sort of commented that we needed to look at our processes in regard to the use of interpreters and how we, how we operate when we are using interpreters. So I think it's very timely, and it's a great thing to be doing.
Okay. Is there any debate on this item? Yes, Councillor Ratnam.
Could I please move a slight amendment? And I'm happy to speak to it if I have a seconder, and that is to remove the words review the policy and say that council receive a report on the policies and procedures regarding the use of interpreters, etc.
Okay, that is an amendment that's been moved by Councillor Ratnam. Is there a seconder?
May I ask a question to that?
I'll get a seconder and then we'll take questions. So, second of Councillor Lenka Thompson.
Let's speak to it first.
Yep, I'll allow
I just want to speak to it very briefly.
The
reason I'm moving that is because I think to say that we want to review, I agree that there might be some concerns around what the policies and procedures are. I'd like to know what they are before we ask for a full-scale review of the policies and procedures. So I actually think we need a presentation of what is the current policy and procedure. There might have been a policy and procedure that wasn't followed correctly. So that's not about reviewing the policy and procedure. That is about something about the adherence to it and whether everyone's aware of it. So there might be other problems that are creeping up that's actually not in the policies and procedures. So I think this step to ask for the report first, and we can say that the report comes to us within a short time frame. So by the next council meeting, if our officers are amenable to that, which will help it keep moving. And then I'm open to reviewing the policy if that report identifies that there's been flagrant breaches of it.
Well, may I make a suggestion?
Yes, Councillor Gillies.
May I make a suggestion that we defer this until next meeting, and then the officers just send us a copy of the policy so that we can just read the policy?
Okay. I think the CEO wants to make a point, and then I'll come back to that.
Just a really quick piece of input. A lot of those things that you talked about, absolutely in the sort of living memory here of anybody who's been here, 12 years or longer, nobody has ever remembered a UPC where there has been an interpreter. There were some clear learnings. I recently wrote back to the resident who listed some of the issues that occurred. There are absolute learnings from each of those, and I made a number of commitments around particularly how people can access those services, because there are quite a few services that are there, and what we found in reviewing that is that the awareness of those services, the capacity to access them, some protocols around that, and being able to be, have a simple process to access those things were quite important in this, and are things that we can do differently. We could turn a report around very quickly because we've basically analysed that whole UPC for those issues, and so we could turn that report around quite quickly if you would like to call for it. Sorry.
A review report, or like a review of the policy, or just a report on what the policy currently is?
We could turn around very quickly a report that talks about the current policy, but also we could include in that report some of those key issues that need to be addressed that we observed from just the experience of having done that UPC and having gone through that planning process. We have done most of that work in analysing that particular incident in response to the letter that we got, and that was a very detailed sort of process. So that would be we would be able to turn that around quickly, and then you'd get a chance to see what is the nature of this problem.
So could I suggest an added bit to the amendment? And so it is the council receives a report on the policies and procedures and issues identified regarding the use of interpreters. That'll canvass the whole lot.
Okay. Is that proposed amendment acceptable to the mover?
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Okay.
Can we just add that by the next council meeting?
The next council meeting, by the September council meeting.
Okay.
Can do.
Thanks.
Can do?
Because
Good to hear. All right. Councillor Tapanos.
I'll speak briefly. I'm very much supportive of the motion as being proposed, but I just wanted to say some comments. So I thought that on the night the interpreter did an outstanding job considering the difficulties, and I wanted to put that on record. I also felt that there are some learnings that could be made from night's activities, particularly on planning matters. And one of the ones that became very obvious to me was that there needed to be time for the interpreter to interpret the officer's report, as we were dealing with very specific planning points. It was very difficult to just, for the interpreter to say in a different language, as point B in the report, without actually explaining what point B actually was. And that kind of learning is important, and I believe the organisation next time should probably get the interpreter in for about half an hour to an hour earlier and actually interpret the report. And also perhaps the chair can interpret a little bit about the process of the meeting, so these things don't have to be done at the actual meeting and take up a lot of time. I'm not sure whether council ought to consider some headphones and perhaps potentially get that UN model when there are a number of people from a non-English speaking background to be able to actually have an interpreter speak to a specific set of people live as the meeting is progressing. That one item took in about 2.5 to 3 hours to complete, as we had to pause for things to be interpreted and go back and forth. So a system like that certainly would have saved that kind of time.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further discussion on this item? No. I'll put the now amended motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. General business items. We'll start with Councillor Bolton.
I don't have any tonight, thanks.
No? Councillor Gillies? No? Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, I have one, please. And my general business item is just for noting. It's aimed at alerting the Moreland community to an outstanding achievement of one of our councillors. Last weekend, Councillor Samantha Ratnam graduated with a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Melbourne. Her research focused on youth, identity and global citizenship. Previously, Councillor Matt Ratnam, or as she can now entitled to be called, Dr Ratnam, had obtained both a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Social Work with honours from the University of Melbourne. And it strikes me that sometimes we know so little about the other people, the other parts of their lives of the people that we share this table with. And I think it's important that when we do find out things that we celebrate them. As a qualified social worker, Dr Ratnam worked as a counsellor and a project worker in drug and alcohol rehabilitation service before going to Sri Lanka in 2004 to work with the International Development Fund. There she was based at local counselling services and later at the Child Rights Project based in Colombo. Upon returning to Australia in 2005, she was employed as Youth Participation Coordinator of Plan Australia, a child-centred international community development agency. In this role, she coordinated the Global Connections program that connected young people living in different contexts and countries to each other. My item is only for noting, as I know that my fellow councillor probably doesn't want the formal acknowledgement of council recognising achievement, but to achieve such a qualification and also combining this research that she's carried on with her councillor duties, her work commitments, her recent marriage, in my view makes the accolade even more remarkable, and I'm sure my fellow councillors will join in congratulating me on astounding achievement, Dr Ratnam.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And I must say that a few of us around the table were saying prior to the meeting that seeing Councillor Ratnam graduate from her PhD gives a few more of us PhD students hope that one day we might finish too. So congratulations on your achievement. Councillor Ratnam, do you have any... No. General business? I have no general business. Councillor Tapanos?
None from me.
No. Councillor Teddy? Councillor Lincoln Thompson? No. Councillor Rob Thompson?
Yes, I do. The Mayor writes to the Minister responsible for Housing, DHS, and the Police Inspector for Moreland, calling upon them to increase surveillance and presence within the Coburg Hill and Newlands estate regions of Moreland. If I have a seconder, I'll...
Seconded, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Thompson.
I have circulated some correspondence from local residents. I have had some anecdotal discussions, but this has been followed up with some emails, and this is one which is reasonably in-depth. So I'm just asking that we advocate on behalf of the local residents there with some correspondence to both our police enforcement and also the owners of some of the block in that particular region.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kavanagh?
No, that's fine.
No? Is there any debate on this item? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Anything further, Councillor Thompson? Councillor Yildiz.
Yeah, I've got two. I'm hoping that most of you have read it. I want to move the the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Moreland and also Zouk Mikhail of a city in Lebanon. I'm sure a lot of you have read the fact that they were approached.
I'll just get a seconder.
Yeah, actually,
yes.
yep.
Seconded Councillor Gillies. Councillor Gildies.
So, Council has been approached by the Australian Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Basically, it's just for an MOU, not a sister city, it's an MOU. In May 2015, this year, a delegation visited Lebanon, headed by the President, Fadi Zouki, who's an OAM, the former Premier of Victoria, Steve Brax, and other highly influential business decision makers. To cut a huge story short, councillors, it is quite late that Council establish and sign a Friendship City Agreement Memorandum of Understanding, right to the Mayor, inviting him to visit Moreland, and I would probably add a point there that no council funds be spent on that visit in terms of accommodation or anything like that. We've just got to make sure that's clear, and advise the Australian Lebanon, or for flights or anything like that, advise the Australian Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Council's decision tonight via a letter confirming whether, depending on the outcome of tonight's vote. The second, should I leave that one and then move?
Oh yes, we'll just cover this one first.
we'll
So, is
just
there
do that
anything
one.
further, any further context that you wish to add to that, or debate, or as mover
No,
of the
no,
motion?
that's. I'm just moving it as it is,
Okay.
as read, except for that little minor adjustment that no. Did you add that in there, Lydia? That no funds be, no costs be directed towards that visit. It could be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
To mean that we're going to contribute some funds to invite him here.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Gillies, did you wish to add to that?
Fine, yep.
Is there any debate on this item?
Could
Councillor
I
Ratnam.
move that we defer this item to the next council meeting? I'm happy to speak to it if we have to leave of council to why I'm wanting to defer it.
Yeah, I'd like to debate deferring and explain why that might not be possible. So let's move. Go ahead.
I'd just like to have a bit more information. This did come to us very late in the day today. We haven't had a chance to discuss this as councillors, and I believe it is worth having a discussion about all our sister city relationships to understand how this fits into the context of that. So I'm not speaking against it. I just think we just need just a little bit more time, just a couple more days actually, it would be helpful.
Yeah. If council is happy, I'll respond to that because I was part of the meeting that led to this coming forth. So I'm equally disappointed that it didn't come to us until later this afternoon. The meeting that we had with the Australia-Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry took place about a week ago, and at that meeting they've indicated that they have a very large national gala event / business forum that's taking place in Melbourne on the 11th of September, and they've been approached by Zouk Mikhail specifically as the first Lebanese city to seek a sister city relationship within the state of Victoria, wanting to sign that agreement and sort of celebrate it at that specific event on the 11th of September. Zouk Mikhail, upon being presented with information around a number of the cities in Victoria, their Lebanese populations, people who have been councillors who are of Lebanese descent, chose Moreland as their preferred sister city. So it was a representative from the Australia-Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the chair, who came and met with us last week to discuss this item along with his assistant. And I believe that he sits on a UN panel as well as being an Order of Australia. So he is quite prominent. It seems like a very legitimate proposal. We have done some research on Zouk Mikhail, and it's a city that's located very close to the water. It shares a number of similarities with Moreland in terms of its industry and tourism and culture. And they felt that having such a significant Lebanese population in Australia, in Moreland rather, and given that the city of Moreland has in the past resolved to consider further sister city relationships in Lebanon, we were an appropriate city to approach. But certainly I agree with you that it is limited information on which to go at short notice, and it's really just that we were rushing to prepare something in time for tonight's council meeting in light of the fact that the event is taking place on the 11th of September.
Yes. Thanks very much for that context. That's really helpful. However, I think I'm also wondering about whether this is a general business item. I almost think it's notice of motion, given this is substantive nature. I get that it might not be a change of policy, but I think it is so substantive that it needs to be considered as a notice of motion. But, you know, it is what it is before us tonight. I think we do need to give it some consideration. I understand and acknowledge that there's a timeline that the group would like us to move towards, but in 3 weeks to make such a big decision, which could have real implications. We saw it at the last council meeting where then we're asked to have a visit with a sister city that we have a relationship with. When we say no, there's real implications. So we've got to really think about these things very carefully because we're setting up expectations. So I think we just need a bit more time, and I don't think we can be dictated to by that timeline, unfortunately, as much as we'd like to have it synchronised.
Okay.
What implications?
Councillor Yildiz, I'll allow you to respond to the debate in conclusion. You can conclude the debate, but at the moment we are debating, well, we don't really debate a deferral. We've had a presentation as to why the deferral has been requested. I've responded. I think Councillor Ratnam still wants us to vote on her procedural motion for a deferral, and so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour of deferring the item? 4, 5. All those against? 3, 5. And I will declare the deferral lost on the casting vote of the chair. We'll return to debating the substantive item. So, Councillor Rob Thompson.
Can I speak against the motion? For many of the reasons that we've just discussed during that brief interlude. I'm unaware of the city. I don't know the politics. I don't know the implications that this casts upon us. If it was so important, they should have come to us weeks, if not months in advance. A delegation could have come to us. The Lebanese community here in Moreland could have approached us. It just seems to be that we're like a menu of municipalities, and they've just chosen us because we have some limited connection. Yet I can't see the connection just yet. And if it was proven to us, I'd be more than happy to at least be open to the suggestion. But I don't think we can just go, somebody's come along and asked us to be a potential sister city and make a decision like that when there's probably other cities around the world that would be far more conducive to becoming a sister city with us, although I'm pretty much anti-sister city.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there a speaker in favour of the motion? No, you close the debate. Any further speakers? Yes, Councillor Tapanos?
What do you want to take?
No, it's okay. You go.
I'm conscious of not taking 3 speakers against in a row. In the proper order of debate, there should be a speaker in favour. Are you speaking in favour?
No.
Well, if there's no further speaker in favour, then I'm not going to take a second speaker in a row against. So, is there a speaker in favour? I did this last month. I'm being fair.
Let's just close it.
No, I'll allow Councillor Yildiz to close the debate.
No, every councillor has a right to speak.
No, look, last month I did say in the practice of proper debate, it's speakers in favour and against. I mean, there's no point, it's not a debate if we have 4 speakers against, so it's purposeless. Councillor Yildiz.
1.9%, or approximately 3,000 people of the Moreland population, are from Lebanon. If Council agrees to sign this MOU, the Mayor will be invited to attend the Australian... I hope you appreciate that some of these things do happen quite quickly. The Mayor has obviously met with representatives. You've had a former Premier of Victoria go over might not have any credibility. That wasn't a great one, sorry, only a couple of terms he served. But I think he was a very, very good Premier. But on that note, I can appreciate the fact that it may seem a little bit rushed, but it's not on our part. It's the fact that they've been a bit delayed in their responses to some of our questions. So, but I just think when you talk about implications, what implications could a potential MOU sister city arrangement have, except to foster diversity, encourage multiculturalism, further the relationships that we have with the various Lebanese communities in the city of Moreland. Having a sister city relationship, we're not paying any money, we're not contributing any funds. This is whether it's an MOU, whether it's a sister city, it's about enhancing relationships with our community. So I can't understand why, whether it's rushed or not, I just can't understand why something like this would be questioned and I guess to some extent interrogated, I guess. I just don't understand what the issue seems to be. It's a sister city MOU.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. I'll now put Councillor Yildiz's motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? 6, I declare the motion lost.
Can I call for a division?
Yes, division has been called. All those who voted in favour, please raise their hands. All those against? Okay. Councillor Yildiz, any further general business?
Yeah, I think you know about this one as well. I just received your email later this afternoon. Look, this is basically, again, there's no funds, so don't freak out, some councillors. Can I have a seconder to this motion, please? That council write a letter to Senator George Brandis, Minister for Arts, requesting that he reverse the decision and return the transferred funds from the National Program for Excellence in the Arts back to the Australia Council and begin a genuine consultation and discussion with the small to medium arts sector and their peak bodies across all art forms in all states.
It's seconded by Councillor Gillies. I'm going to move a procedural motion that we defer the item to the next council meeting. All those in favour?
To defer it.
1, 2, 3. All those against?
Well, read
the email you sent.
it. Yeah, 5 o'clock, 3
I'll
o'clock.
declare that carried.
Deferral's carried. It's deferred.
Be deferred.
Oh, well.
Any urgent business? No. Could I please have a motion to close the meeting to the public in accordance with Section 89(2) of the Local Government Act? Moved Councillor Gillies. Somebody to second. Seconded Councillor
You
Kavanagh.
see me now, I notice.
All those in favour? No. All those against?
Councillor Gillies has a point. I've seen her hand go up.
I declare that carried.
First.
Thank you to the gallery for your attendance.
Do we have to extend the meeting or not? 7?
I think it's 10:30, isn't it?
Is it 10:30?
10:30 when we
No, it's
extend it.
10:07.
10. Oh, goodness. Sorry, guys. Well, once we move into confidential business, we'll move to defer the meeting. Good night, everyone at home, if you haven't already left us.